Let me put you on my favorite foundation. I use a brush for a fuller look. I love the coverage. It's moisturizing with hyaluronic acid and vitamin E. And lasts all.
This is why you should never watch TV late at night. Once a mother and a father decided they needed a break, so they planned a night out together, and they left their 2 children with their babysitter at home. Everything was going good, the children were well behaved, and the babysitter was just sitting around while watching the kids, but eventually she decided that she wanted to watch some TV. It turns out she couldn't watch it downstairs because they didn't have cable downstairs, so she called the parents and asked if she could watch TV with the kids in their room upstairs. The parents agreed. They were about to hang up the phone when the babysitter had one final request. As she entered the parents' bedroom, she asked if she could cover up their large clown statue with a cloth or a blanket. She said it was making her very uncomfortable. The phone line went dead for a second. Then the mother said over the phone, "Take the children and get out of the house. We don't have a clown statue." As the babysitter turned around, she saw the corners of the clown's mouth widen into a smile. This man's wife left him, but not for the reasons he thought. Once there was a couple who just got married in Paris. They were very happy together, but the wife had one secret she didn't tell her husband yet. She had a birthmark on her face. She'd been wearing makeup to cover it, but she thought once she showed her husband, she would know whether he truly loved her. So after they got married, she took off her makeup and showed him. He was surprised, but he wasn't going to let that change anything. However, the next morning, his wife was gone. Her husband thought that she must have felt upset due to how surprised he looked when he saw her birthmark. Or maybe she had second thoughts. After months of getting no reply, he finally gave up on trying to look for her. He was heartbroken, but after a few years, he got a new job in a different city. He wanted a fresh start in life, but things didn't go as planned. He came across a strange-looking circus called the House of Oddities. This made him very curious, so he went in, but what he saw inside would shock him. Among the other circus acts, he saw a twisted woman rocking back and forth, looking terrified. He screamed as he recognized the birthmark on her face.
This is why you should never get away with murder. A woman named Sophia met a man named Daniel in high school. The couple would always talk about their future and how they wanted to travel when they were older. A couple years later, Sophia gives birth to a little girl named Mia. Mia was the average kid and always loved to carry around her blonde baby doll. One night while Mia was sleeping, Sophia went upstairs and killed the little girl. The couple hid the knife and doll in a box and got away with murder since there was no evidence. 10 years later, Sophia is pregnant again. She gives birth to a little girl named Olivia who had blonde hair. A few years later, they're sitting in the kitchen and Olivia finds the hidden box with the doll and knife inside. Olivia picks up the doll and looks at her mom and says, "I remember playing with this in my old box."
Storytime. So once upon a time in grade 5, I was going through this really strange phenomenon where like 5 of my adult teeth decided to all come in at once. Now I already had this really weird obsession with when I had a loose tooth, I loved to like pluck it out of my face like berries off of a vine. So as you can imagine, sitting there with 5 loose teeth in my mouth felt like I was in an orchard on a hot summer's day. My brothers had just rewatched The Exorcist with me a few nights before while babysitting. So its cinematic masterpiece was still ever fresh in my mind as I sat there not listening to my teacher drone on about numbers, secretly popping my teeth out with my tongue and letting my mouth fill with blood. Till I noticed my dear old classmate Tristane, who used to eat rulers and pick on me, was staring at me. So I looked him dead in the eyes, opened my mouth slowly and let all of the teeth and blood just dribble out onto the desk. Then I said in a low grumble, "You will die tonight." He started screaming and then I had to go to church.
This is why you should always lock your front doors. A kid living with both of his parents decided to watch a movie for their family weekly movie night. He then gets up to use the restroom. As he is in the restroom, he sees all of the power in the house cuts off, and then he hears 2 loud thumps. He locks the bathroom door and hears heavy objects being dragged across the hallway. The kid, freaking out, runs out of the bathroom and runs into the restroom. Once he is inside the room, he locks the door. As he locks the door, he jumps in bed and acts like he's asleep and hopes that this person who is in the house will ignore a child sleeping. He closes his eyes and hears the door creak at the same time. He squints his eyes and sees a man with no eyes dragging the bodies of both of his parents. The man dragging his parents sits his mom's dead body in a chair facing him, and then sets the dad's body on the floor facing up. It was almost like whoever was in the house who killed them wanted him to see it. He then sees the man writing something on the wall and then climbs under his bed. He laid there for hours knowing that if he moved a muscle, he would end up just like his parents. He finally built up enough courage to read the wall, and the writing on the wall said,
"Yes, the picture at the end is real." In 1876, a woman from a very prominent family in Paris goes missing. After years go by and no one has a clue what happened to this woman, friends and family ultimately mourn her death and move on. 25 years later, and this anonymous letter shows up on the Attorney General's desk, claiming that the missing woman's family had a secret. Intrigued by the letter, the police go to the family's home, show it to them, and ask to search the property, to which they say, go for it. They search, they don't find anything, but on the way out, they notice something very peculiar. At the end of some stairs was a door that was padlocked shut. When the family refused to open it, the police break it down and make a horrifying discovery. Cowering on a rotten straw mattress in a pitch-black room was the missing woman, now 50 years old and extremely malnourished. Her mother had imprisoned her there after they had fought over her boyfriend, and she had not seen sunlight or another human being in 25 years.
Have you ever felt like you've forgotten something but can't remember exactly what you forgot? Well, for this one woman, this feeling would lead to a terrifying discovery. She was on the bus on her way home from work one night when she was certain she left something behind in the office. She thought to herself, maybe it's nothing. She had a long day and she just wanted to go home for the night. But of course, she could have never expected the horrifying truth. This feeling of not being able to remember what she forgot became more and more intense. She thought about everything that happened that day. Her boss staring at her creepily, the secretaries gossiping, then she bumped into a man on the bus. She quickly said sorry, but he ignored her. As the bus came to her stop, she stood outside her home and couldn't shake the feeling anymore. She had to go back to the office to find out exactly what she forgot. It was very late at night at this point, but she made it back. She ran up the stairs and opened the office door, but what she saw could only be described as unimaginable. As this woman slowly knelt down on the floor, she finally realized what she left behind. It was her body lying on the floor, strangled to death. Can you imagine being locked inside your house for your whole life? Caroline's aunt and uncle said she was so ugly that she had to be hidden from the world. If anyone saw her, she'd be taken to the church and burned at the stake. But things are not as they seem. One day, Caroline started asking questions. She wanted to know why the other kids could play outside, but she could only sit and look out from her bedroom window. This made her aunt and uncle very angry. They said, "Can't you see yourself? Don't you understand the sacrifices we've had to make to keep you hidden from the world?" She had been convinced that staying trapped was for her own good, but one day she decided to escape. She used the safety pin to unlock the door and left. However, soon after she made it out, two men wearing uniforms started shouting at her. She began running. When she turned a corner, she saw a group of people who pointed at her and screamed, "Monster!" Eventually, a priest came and said, "Take her to the church." They dragged Caroline to the church, put her on an altar, and set her on fire. As the fire grew, the priest turned to the crowd and said, "Look at this monster. Look at her hands, only 5 fingers. Look at her face, only 2 eyes, and her teeth a sickening white."
Story time! So yesterday my friends and I all went to the fair and there were 6 of us in total. And none of us wanted to have to worry about driving there and parking, so we just Ubered instead. So we left the fair around 11:15 and we walked to a nearby shopping center where the Uber picked us up about 10 minutes late. We ended up leaving at 11:30. We get in the Uber, the man says hello, and we head home the normal way. Everything's fine. And my parents don't like when I Uber, so they were tracking me on Life 360 from the moment I got in the car. After about 10 minutes in, I get a text from my mom, and it said, "Where are you?" I look up from my phone and I realize I have no idea where we are, and Ubers know their directions, they know how to take you home. We were 20 minutes out of the way. So I'm terrified. My mom's texting me nonstop, literally about to call the police. I'm gonna run out of time.
So are we cool? Like, are we in agreement?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I have to go.
What the heck is A, B, C, D, E, F, G mean?
It's just a phrase I like to use. That means
Is that a real phrase?
the conversation is over.
You've said this before.
You've never heard that phrase?
No? Have you?
Yes, that means the convo is done.
If you say A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah. G, goodbye.
This is why you should never take a prank too far. Once there were 2 young twins who lived in a small town and they were known for constantly misbehaving. One day a man had passed away peacefully in his home and the twins wanted to play a prank on everyone else living in the town, so they snuck into the house and started messing with the man's body. One twin moved his mouth like a puppet and the other one poked his eyes out with a stick. As they were doing this, they heard footsteps. They couldn't find anywhere to hide, so they placed the body back in the coffin, then got in the coffin themselves and closed the lid. But what they didn't know was they were taking the coffin straight to the funeral. The people carrying the coffin noted that it was much heavier than usual but brushed it off. No one even noticed that the twins were gone until the coffin was lowered. The twins' mother appeared at the cemetery about the missing twins, which stopped the funeral and began a search. Eventually, the man carrying the coffin confessed that the coffin had weighed more than it was supposed to, so they lifted it out and opened the lid. They did find the boys there, but they found them lying on top of the body, whose hands were wrapped tightly around each of their necks. The twins had been strangled. This is why you should always pay attention to details. A woman was brushing her hair when she found a little bump at the back of her head, so she called her husband to have him check it out for her. He said it looks like a button. It's small, round, hairless, and flat at the top. He joked around it with her, asking, "What do you think would happen if I pressed it?" Then he did, and the woman instantly leaned up and gave him a kiss. Then the husband kept pressing it as a joke, but something went wrong. It seemed like he pressed it all too many times, and a cool numbness spread down the woman's neck, around her arms and her legs. Her eyes automatically shut and her vision went black. A while later, the woman woke up and learned that she had fainted. The husband kept apologizing with tears in his eyes as if it was all his fault. Eventually, they both went about their lives and tried to forget about this incident, but the woman just couldn't, because afterwards, she came across a photo of her family in the living room. It was a photo of her and her husband's wedding propped up on a ceramic urn. She looked closer at the photo of her own face. She's smiling as if she's the happiest girl in the world, but there's a small scar under her left eyebrow, a scar that she... When you go to sleep tonight, don't do what she did. Once there was a young woman named Alicia who moved into a very old house with her parents, but she could have never expected the horrifying things that this would lead to. After living in this house for a few weeks, things started becoming strange. Alicia noticed she was becoming weaker and feeling sick. Pretty soon, she couldn't leave her bed and would sleep for most of the day. The doctors came to examine her, and everyone wanted to find out what this mysterious sickness was, but no one had any answers, until one day Alicia passed away while sleeping. Then, after her funeral, her mother came home and with a broken heart began cleaning her room. That's when she noticed something strange about Alicia's pillow. There were 2 small red stains. She picked it up and realized the pillow was unusually heavy, so she called her husband to go look at it with her. Then Alicia's mother felt something inside the pillow move. Her father opened the pillow and took all the feathers out. There they saw something crawl out. It was a monstrous black spider. Night after night, as Alicia lay in bed, this huge spider had been slowly drinking all her blood through her pillow.
Refuse to open it, the police break it down and make a horrifying discovery. Cowering on a rotten straw mattress in a pitch black room was the missing woman, now 50 years old and extremely malnourished. Her mother had imprisoned her there after they had fought over her boyfriend, and she had not seen sunlight or another human being in 25 years.